It is time for another edition of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I'm Jason Floyd. That is fighter Pete Rogers Jr. is here to break down UFC Vegas 105. Goes down tomorrow inside the UFC Apex. Right now, lock time currently 6 p.m. Eastern time. Main card going to start at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, headlined by a key matchup in the featherweight division. We got Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy. Pete, how's it going, man?
What's going on, Jason? It's been a battle up here in New England with avoiding the sickness and having a sick household. I know that you're battling the same thing over there, but that's why we had to change the show date. Originally planned to get this out there earlier, but good thing that we're doing it today, I guess, because now Martin Buday has a different opponent.
Yeah, you talked about now the LFA light heavyweight champion coming in, who's going to have a 40-pound weight difference in that matchup. We'll see what the price point is on DraftKings in terms of that one. And, as we kind of start to really get into UFC Vegas 105, and by the way, Sam, appreciate the super chat, is looking at some of these salaries, like there's just some of them I just was like, holy cow, like a $9,100 Brad Tavares. I just was like, God damn it, if you're playing that fight in DFS, like to me, it's underdog or pass.
Yeah, so a lot of people can be like, the lines may be warranted because of how safe they could be in those particular matchups, but that doesn't mean that it's going to translate for DFS production, right? Like, you can take this show for both betting and DFS. We try to balance it as best as possible. For DFS, other than a contrarian play, I don't know why you would really put Brad Tavares in your lineups. He's never been really DFS friendly, low volume, good takedown defense, but he doesn't really stuff the stat sheet, if you want to call it that, of going out there and putting together spectacular performances. Whereas if GM3 wins, he's the opposite. He really, can find a finish. And the guy has like 30 submission wins, crazy, ridiculous amounts of subs on his record. And, he's always live when the fight hits the mat. It's just, can it or will it? So, I mean, the salaries definitely stuck out to me. I mean, I was telling you pre-show, like anytime we get some massive women's MMA favorites, like I understand it to a point, but I don't not want to get behind it, especially if they're not a high level wrestler or a violent finisher. So like Loma at the top is somebody that I'd probably be a little bit lighter on. I understand it's a softball matchup, but I'm excited to see if you agree with me on some of these fights or disagree.
Yeah, I mean, your biggest favorite is a female fighter as a 13-1 betting favorite in Barbosa. And, there's just certain fights that I just really don't want to get to. One of the ones is 𝗏 and Alencar. That's one of those ones that, to me, it's got 15 minutes just written all over it, and I just don't see the upside. So I know as I was developing my first lineup, I did kind of had a little bit of trouble kind of developing that first line. Of course, we do have our DraftKings contest. That contest is up on our Discord channel, so you can get in that. We'll make sure to add that to the YouTube description as well, so be sure to get into that contest. But let's get right into this one, Pete. The main event is Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy is a minus 340 betting favorite, plus 260 for Emmett, who is $6,900 on DK, $12 on FanDuel. Murphy, $9,300 on DK, and $20 on FanDuel. Of course, the last time we saw Josh Emmett was that viral knockout of Bryce Mitchell that I think we've seen a lot over the past couple of weeks because of what's going on with Bryce Mitchell here. But the fact is that was December of 2023. He's 40 years old. But the one thing is power. They always say power is the last thing to go. And Lerone Murphy on the other side really has always been kind of known as the decision guy.
Yeah, so I'm really, really interested in this main event. I mean, I think it's a perfect matchup for a guy that has been at the top, trying to retain his status at the top, going up against an up-and-comer, if you will, who's he's an older prospect, but a guy that's really, trying to fight to get into the top 5 or break into title contention, and that's Lerone Murphy, where he's definitely been, a very hot fighter of late. It's just really hard for me to count out a guy with so much power like Josh Emmett possesses. So in this matchup, you have Lerone Murphy, who has been putting together pretty solid performances, coming off a unanimous decision win over Dan Ige and Edson Barboza, Josh Culibao, split decision of Gabriel Santos. That Gabriel Santos fight, I think, kind of humanized Lerone Murphy for me. And then even in the Dan Ige fight, there are moments where you see there are some vulnerabilities defensively. Offensively, I think that he's as talented as anybody within the division. His hands are good. His wrestling is improving. The way that he incorporates everything, he has multiple paths to victory against many opponents. If you are weak in an area, Lerone kind of puts together a game plan where he's going to look to exploit it. Digging into the stats of this fight against Josh Emmett, I think the public and the betting market is really counting out Josh Emmett, and largely due to the 7-year youth advantage for Lerone Murphy and the 6.5 height plus reach advantage for Lerone Murphy. I completely understand that, but the true 5-round experience in the UFC against top level competition, it lies with Josh Emmett. Obviously, there has been a layoff, and he did take care of some ailments that were really bothering him throughout his performances. I listened to a lot of Josh Emmett interviews, and he was saying that he felt like he was fighting at like half his potential because of his limitations due to his injuries. So despite having a viral knockout over Bryce Mitchell, he decided to take the time to sit on the sidelines and get healthy enough so that he could go on a run for the title. Now, guys that are 40 years old in the lighter weight divisions don't typically have the greatest success rate. And I think that's why the line is what it is, despite the experience advantage for Josh Emmett. But I can't count out the power, man. Josh Emmett's talking about how his power is even better now that he feels healthy. If you do look at the stats, the strikes attempted per minute will side with Josh Emmett. Murphy's at 8.88, whereas Josh Emmett's at 11.22. So a slight lean towards Emmett with the volume and obviously with the power. The takedowns attempted will actually be with Murphy a little bit more because he's willing and able to lace up the wrestling shoes to just try to mix it up and stay busy and look like the more active fighter. But the strength of schedule for Lerone Murphy inside the UFC, it's been okay. It's been pretty solid. Edson Barboza at the tail end of his career, not really his, the best Edson Barboza, in a 5-round atmosphere where he just completely brutalized him. Dan Ige hit him with a big right hand and dropped him. But from the regional scene on and everything in the UFC, you have Lerone Murphy's strength of schedule sitting at about 50% win rate. And his win percentage is at obviously the same thing because he's an undefeated fighter. Whereas Josh Emmett's strength of schedule win rate's at 63% and his win rate is at 60%. So, I think everybody's counting out Josh Emmett, and I do find this line to be quite wide. And I actually think it'll be a little bit more competitive than what the public and what Vegas is kind of predicting. So, with the value, with everything, the experience, the power, I do see a world where Josh Emmett lands a shot and knocks out Lerone Murphy. I also see a world where he bests him over 5 rounds. Obviously, he has some things going against him. Not being in the cage since like a year and a half ago, 7 years. 7 years older than Lerone Murphy, and height plus reach is 6.5 inches. Disadvantage to Josh Emmett. So. I get why people are getting behind Lerone Murphy, but I kind of think that he's a little bit overhyped in a situation where it's a prove-it spot. So I'll be siding with the value here in Josh Emmett, and I don't know if that's going to be really a popular pick, but at 6,900, sign me up for Josh Emmett. I don't think he's going to get finished. He did go 5 rounds with 𝐒𝐤 𝗏𝗏𝗵𝐃. Granted, he got the shit kicked out of him, and for a large majority, but who hasn't been finished by 𝐒𝐤 𝗏𝗏𝗵𝐃? It's been pretty impressive. So. I'm going to go with Josh Emmett here to pull off the upset despite being a 40-year-old featherweight.
The salary is what sticks out to me when you're talking about DraftKings, $6,900, $12 on FanDuel. Just thinking that fight's going to go 25 minutes. Unless Emmett does knock him out. I mean, that's where, if you go over right now into the YouTube chat, Daniel says, seem fooled, but I really like Josh Emmett here. 6 of the last 9 fights have gotten 1+ knockdown, including multiple fights +2. Only knockout was a brutal Jeremy Stephens KO, and we know he got the power, and also going on to say, and I totally agree with this, is 6.5 for Emmett on a greasy card like this, definitely have interest. I think he drops him and takes Murphy's here. That to me, it's if you told me Emmett was a price tag of $7,400 or $7,500, I think I would have less interest. But the $6,900 price tag on DraftKings is what really gets me.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a salary play, but I also think just from the line standpoint, it's just wide. Like I feel like it's a competitive fight. I don't think that Lerone Murphy goes out there and does what he did to Edson Barboza. I just don't think that happens. And shout out to everybody in chat. Shout out to Daniels for killing it in the $3 contests. And shout out to Sam as always for constantly supporting the channel. I feel like our shows are sponsored by Samuel Campana. I really do. I feel like he really just kind of sponsors the show himself. But we really appreciate it. And each and every one of you guys, we appreciate your insight, input, feedback, and engagement in the Discord. So we really appreciate you guys.
And of course, now our co-main event is Pat Sabatini taking on Joanderson Brito. Joanderson Brito is a minus 245 betting fair, plus 200 for Sabatini, who's 7,500 on DK, $11 on FanDuel. Joanderson Brito is 8,700 on DK and $17 on FanDuel. Brito coming off that split decision loss there in his last matchup against William Gomez. All of his UFC wins have come via stoppage. And when you look at Pat Sabatini, and when I think of Pat Sabatini, Pete, the first thing that comes is talking about that grappling game that he does have.
Yeah, I mean, this is a compelling fight, right? I mean, it can't get much more striker versus grappler matchup in the co-main event. I mean, you have Joanderson Brito, who is such a violent guy. He seems to be like a mean fighter. Not every fighter's mean. This guy's definitely mean. Patrick Sabatini, an exceptional grappler, exceptional wrestler. But I kind of think that he's empty on the feet, right? Like he's got nothing for Joanderson Brito. And for this being on the, starting on the feet, any moment that is not engaging in grappling, I think he's completely vulnerable to get chin checked. I mean, getting hurt and wobbled on the feet by Damon Jackson's not a good look at all, despite, Damon Jackson having a very good skill set in the grappling department. It was a front kick up the middle and some follow-up shots that really hurt Patrick Sabatini. And then you think about the Diego Lopez fight. You think about the Jamal Emmers fight, where Emmers was on his way to winning that fight, and Sabatini got his wits about him and heel hooked him despite getting dropped on his ass. I understand why people can be desperate for some underdogs on this slate because, truthfully, I don't think this is a very popular underdog. A lot of them come through. I don't think it's an underdog type of card. I think there's tons of underdogs that have paths to victory, but I'm not too confident in them because I think they're low level. Sabatini's not low level. He's exceptionally talented, comes from a fantastic gym in Philly. Marquez BJJ, that whole team with Sean Brady and everybody, they're just so talented down there in Philly. And I think that we've seen his dominance can be, despite there being a physicality difference, he can go out there and take the back and work towards a submission win, similar to how he did in his previous fight against Jonathan Pierce. I think that, Joanderson Brito has shown a vulnerability to get taken down like he did against Jonathan Pierce, but he did get back to his feet. And I do expect him to possibly get taken down, but he will get back to his feet. And there are moments where he will land some shots because he can actually offensively grapple too. Like Joanderson Brito can put Pat Sabatini on his back. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. But maybe, putting him on his back kind of nullifies everything. And he doesn't have to he doesn't have to worry about being on bottom. Joanderson Brito lands a shot, and I think this fight's over, truthfully. I think that Pat Sabatini has to be perfect for 15 minutes to get this one done. And he has shown, an ability to do so. But I just see such a vulnerability for Pat Sabatini on the feet that I have to go with Joanderson Brito. I mean, the strengths of schedules for both of these guys are fantastic. 68% win rate for Joanderson Brito's competition, 66% for Sabatini, 67 for Brito's wins, 63 for Sabatini's wins. So, I mean, they're pretty evenly matched as far as like preparation leading into the UFC and in the UFC. But I just think that the gap is way too wide on the feet, and on the mat, it's closer. So give me Joanderson Brito to knock out Patrick Sabatini, and I think it's going to be a pretty violent finish. And unfortunate because I like Sabatini more than I like Joanderson Brito. I just do not like this matchup for Pat Sabatini at all. So give me Joanderson Brito here. I think he's a good value, and honestly, he's live to get this quick win bonus. Truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, to me, for Pat Sabatini, I think it's about surviving a little bit early storm. By the way, kudos to Chad here for making this, throwing this out here. Daniel Santos has not weighed in, and according to Adam Martin, who's been a long-time Mirror reporter, the scale has been removed from the stage. So maybe we'll see if that would very much look like the fact of Davy Grant's not going to have a fight here come tomorrow night. Next up, we do have a fighter who did miss weight, and as expected, as of right now, fight's still on. 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 taking on Lee here. 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳, a plus 110 betting underdog. He weighed in at 139.5 a little while ago. Taking on Lee here, who's a minus 130 betting favorite. He's 8,400 on DK, $15 on FanDuel. 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳, 7,800 on DK, and $13 on FanDuel. Of course, we saw 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 make his UFC debut last year in November. Did not get the victory in that one. Lee, we've really been talking a lot about this, it seems like, in the past couple episodes, where another road to the UFC fighter getting another shot here in the UFC.
Yeah, so, I mean, very, very interesting fight with high variance, in my opinion. I mean, you got Chang Ho Lee here, who we definitely have a larger sample size on. I mean, 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 was on the Dana White's Contender Series fight, but he really looked poor in his UFC debut. So I'm interested here in this matchup just because I actually think that Chang Ho Lee has some grappling upside, but he has to be wise to 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 submission skills because Romeus is typically the better grappler in most matchups. Doesn't have the greatest wrestling, but his jiu-jitsu is kind of slick and explosive. Chang Ho Lee has a year of youth on 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 and 5 inches in the height plus reach advantage. The strength of schedule is something that I want to point out, and this is why I'm going to be siding with Chang Ho Lee significantly in this matchup. I mean, the strength of schedule, the wins for Chang Ho Lee, 77 wins and 36 defeats. 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳's strength of schedule, 96 wins and 98 losses. So the percentage of strength of schedule is 68% for Chang Ho Lee, 49% for 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳. And then when you dive into their wins, 66 for Chang Ho Lee and 44 for 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳. I just think, like, I mean, once you get into the UFC, there's no gimmies, right? And obviously fighting fighters off of the road to UFC typically is the lowest level of the UFC, but I still think there could be a gap in the road to UFC guys from some of these Dana White Contender Series fighters that kind of got lucky. I think that 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 missing weight is somewhat of a red flag. It could be a strategic move to possibly be a little bit heavier because I do think that Chang Ho Lee will be the more physical of the two. The strikes attempted should side with Chang Ho Lee, 7 strikes per minute, whereas Romeus is 5.67. The takedowns attempted is the big difference maker here. Like, 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 has a submission skill set to him, but I think the better wrestling and judo trips and all that side with Chang Ho Lee, where he will attempt 10 takedowns per fight per 15 minutes, where 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 is about 2.98 per 15 minutes in the attempted market. So it's a volatile fight, and it's definitely one that I don't want to have a ton of money attached to, because I think that they're both pretty young in their careers and both pretty green as far as the UFC is considered. So the pick will be Chang Ho Lee, especially because of the strength of schedule. But I can see why people get desperate, especially when fights start falling out. You need to come behind, get behind an underdog, and what better way to get behind an underdog that's kind of at a buy low spot, where 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳 was favored against Gaston Bolanos, and now he sits as an underdog against a road to UFC guy. I get it, I totally understand, but it's not going to be me. So I'm going to be picking Chang Ho Lee here. At 8,400, I think it's a pretty solid price tag for him too, given the grappling nature. So give me Chang Ho Lee.
Yeah, I like Lee in that situation as well. Was just kind of going through MMA Twitter to see what was going on, and right now it does look like 𝐃𝐲𝐬𝐳, they're going to let this fight go forward, and according to Sherdog, the fight for Davy Grant and Daniel Santos is off.
Oh, it is off.
Well, I mean, if you don't weigh in, they remove the scale.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
That's usually a so I guess we can just put the old big squiggly line through that fight.
Well, I'm looking at these things, and I have no idea what, like, I got some Spanish, Latino America, MMA Latino America, and it's all in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever the hell this is, and I don't understand it, but it does appear that you are correct. So that sucks. I mean, that definitely takes away an underdog that a lot of people wanted to get to in Davy Grant. I would have been on Willie Cat Santos personally. unless he had a horrible weight cut, which apparently he did. But yeah, I would have been on the 𝗿𝐿𝐼𝐺 side, and Davy Grant was everybody's darling. So that's unfortunate, and that's where a guy in like a 𝗃𝐲𝐕Hs Romeus could become a little bit more popular, going up against a low-level opponent, so to say, from Road to UFC in a buy low spot. So yeah.
Next up, we got a matchup of UFC veterans. Brad Tavares taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Brad Tavares, a minus 195 betting fair, plus 165 for GM3, who's 3,100 DK, $10 on FanDuel. Tavares 9,100 DK, and $18 over on FanDuel. Brad is 1-4 in his last 5. 18 of his 25 UFC fights have gone the distance. And something that you kind of alluded to a little while ago with GM3, 11 of his 12 UFC wins are via submission.
Yeah, so I'm giggling to myself because I just remembered a stat. So in this matchup, right, this is clear striker versus grappler as well. I mean, Meerschaert can strike. He has shown improvements in his striking. His kickboxing has improved a little bit. His kicks, he throws a good rear kick. His hands aren't the best. The more technical kickboxer will be Brad Tavares here, but the opposite stance could pause or limit some of the output from both of these guys. Lots of backhands, lots of back leg kicks to the inside, to the body, to the head. I think that they could kind of stifle each other a little bit. I mean, the striking output for Brad Tavares is at 7.97 strikes attempted per minute. Gerald Meerschaert, GM3 at 6.88. The takedowns attempted per 15 minutes is for Gerald Meerschaert at about 5.7. Brad Tavares at 2.84. So even though that, Brad Tavares is a pretty talented kickboxer, he's a good overall MMA fighter, and he understands how to win minutes and win moments. So if a fight's close, he will attempt some takedowns in his own right, but primarily he's just got phenomenal takedown defense sitting at 80%. There have been some vulnerabilities in Brad Tavares' game as of late, right? Like, he doesn't look like the Brad Tavares of old. They're pretty evenly matched up from the age standpoint, the same age, 3.5 inches in the height plus reach department for Gerald Meerschaert. But the strength of schedule, Jason, is something that I really want to talk about in this matchup, because the win rate of the strength of schedule for Brad Tavares sits at 69%, and GM3's sits at 49%. How the hell is that possible when GM3's been in UFC forever? And I can tell you why. It's because he's fought Jay Ellis multiple times. You want to know a fun fact, Jason? Jay Ellis has beaten Gerald Meerschaert. Does that
crazy.
blow your mind or what? I mean, granted, isn't that nuts? I mean, like, a lot of fighters have horrible losses, poor losses. Every single fighter out there will have a poor loss. I have one. It is what it is. But that kind of blows my mind. And I think that, fighting Jay Ellis multiple times, obviously for ratios and for, win strength and strength of schedules, it's going to do nothing but hurt it. So, I mean, you have GM3's, record of his opponents sitting at 789 wins, 818 losses, whereas Tavares is at 525 wins and 229 losses. So, good God. I think this fight remains on the feet. I just don't think that Gerald Meerschaert will get him to the ground. Do I like the wide lines attached to it? No. I probably think that Tavares should be around like minus 175. But I just don't see a world where GM3, gets more than one takedown. He may only need one takedown, but I think that Brad is pretty skilled and pretty wise, even if it hits the mat. So I'll be picking Brad Tavares to win a decision. There is a possibility, maybe, that Brad Tavares hurts and rocks GM3. But the finishing skills of Brad Tavares are completely lacking. I mean, I remember I went heavy on him to finish Chris Weidman. And when he was unable to finish Chris Weidman off the couch, off of crazy layoffs and all that, I was like, all right, this guy's just a decision guy. Like, ultimately just a decision guy. So give me Brad Tavares to win a decision here at a pretty rich price tag.
Yeah, what I was actually I was trying to pull up here as I had to re-log back into my Hard Rock app to see exactly what Brad Tavares is to win via decision from the betting side. Let's see here. Plus 115. I'm kind of actually surprised you're getting plus money.
On what, the Tavares decision?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's his win. That's his path to victory, in my opinion. I mean, I think that with the way this card is going, no Davy Grant, lots of ugly underdogs galore. I can see why people, including chat, talking about they want to get to GM3. And I kind of initially, when I saw the fight card, I go, GM3 is a little interesting against the guy who's been struggling of late, you know? And you know, I can say that GM3 has added a new camp to his team, where he's gone out to Valley Flow Striking, to my friend Mike Valley's gym, training alongside Bilal Muhammad. You know, and that whole gym out there. So I think that gym's been a pretty talented gym. Austin Hubbard looked good last week until he didn't in the final third round. And that was the lone loss for last week for me from predictions for my model and my insight. I went 11-1, and Hubbard had that in the bag until he didn't and got elbowed. But yeah, I still have Brad Tavares winning this fight, so we'll have to see.
Next up, we got O'Day taking on Luis, who's making his UFC debut after being on Dana White's Contender Series. Of course, prior to the Dana White's Contender Series, for Fury FC, he's a minus 265 betting favorite, plus 215 for O'Day, who's 7,300 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. Luis, 8,900 on DK, and $19 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that Gurule here is in an interesting spot because he's going up against a UFC veteran in Ode Osborne, who will hold a significant height plus reach advantage over Gurule. Gurule is 2 years younger, no UFC experience, you know, solid fight on Dana White's Contender Series fight where he had to defend a ton of takedowns. But Ode Osborne in the height plus reach department has 11 inches on him. So that's a lot to overcome. And I do think that Ode Osborne is talented offensively, defensively, and as the fight gets out of the first round, I think that he becomes less and less like himself. So for me, this is interesting because we have a small sample size of Gurule here. But when I went and I look back at Gurule's strength of schedule, it's been pretty solid. His strength of schedule sits at 60%, whereas Ode Osborne sits at 62%. So 60% not being in the UFC is kind of impressive. So he's fighting solid competition. Obviously, Ode Osborne has an advantage in that situation because he's been fighting ridiculous names from Manel Kopp to Charles Johnson. So I went and I looked into the win strength, and Gurule, obviously he's undefeated, so his win strength sits at 60%. Ode Osborne hasn't beaten the best competition. The guys that he's beaten have a total record of 73 and 74. So Ode Osborne is competitive in plenty fights, but his win strength sits at 49%. So, I mean, I do think that the advantage, from the outside will clearly be Ode Osborne, but Gurule has shown me a good tendency to get inside and throw tons of volume. Should be attempting about 14 strikes per minute. And obviously, I think both of these guys will be looking to keep it standing. If there is somebody to try to implement some wrestling, I actually do think it will be Ode Osborne in this fight. We have seen him go to the wrestling in the past. 4 takedowns attempted per 15 minutes. I just don't know if he'll really have a tremendous amount of success in that department. So, not my most confident pick. And I do think it's quite interesting that you have a Dana White's Contender Series fighter with a pretty wide line over a UFC veteran at this point. But I still do think that Gurule wins here. I have Gurule, outpointing Osborne over 15 minutes. I can also see Gurule actually hurting and possibly finishing Ode Osborne. But a guy that has double the fights and half of them in the UFC, Ode Osborne has kind of, learned on the job, and he's fought some crazy competition. But he has shown a vulnerability to get knocked out. Manel Kopp, Tyson Nam. Also, if you could take him down, Asa Amabayev and Jafel Filio submitted him in round 1. I just feel like we should have seen more improvements out of Ode Osborne throughout his run in the UFC. And maybe he's never really, lived up to the potential that he had. But, we have Gouroulet undefeated from amateurs and pros. And I'm going to be picking Gouroulet here. His opponent's combined record is 74 wins and 49 defeats. I think I'm going to side with him to get a nice victory over a tough debut fight. But, yeah, give me Gouroulet here. I'm just not really in love with the salary.
Yeah, O'Day's lost 3 in a row, 4 of 5. I mean, you can see the writing is on the wall here with this type of matchup in terms of this one. Next up, we got Torres Finney taking on Robert Valentin. Valentin, a plus 245 betting underdog, minus 310 for Finney, who's making his UFC debut. $9,000 on DK, $18 on FanDuel, $7,200 on DK for Valentin, and $11 on FanDuel. Torres Finney may be, from a height-wise, one of the smallest heavyweights we've ever seen in the UFC. And he's a guy that I'm familiar with from out of that Tennessee regional scene.
Yeah, I mean, Torres Finney was put through the ringer on the Contender Series. I mean, he really was, and it's quite impressive because maybe the UFC brass and Dana White thought that he would lose eventually, and they wouldn't have to give him a contract because he is a 5'8" middleweight, which is quite ridiculous. I actually think it's kind of impressive, I mean, you have a guy defying the odds in a very large and tall division. He does have 4 years on Valentin in this matchup, but Valentin is going to be the taller, longer guy who has 7.5 inches in the height plus reach department. Finney went through the ringer on the Contender Series, as I mentioned, picking up a TKO win in his last one, a decision win in his second to last one, and in his debut on the Contender Series, beating a fighter that I'm pretty familiar with, and Yuri Panfarov, who actually beat one of my fighters and one of my prospects within my gym. I think that Finney's wrestling is so overpowering, and he has a game plan, and he sticks to the game plan. He's big, he's muscular, he's explosive, but he knows what he's best at, and he doesn't shy away from it. So I really like that because the guy's going to go out there and attempt a takedown. He could run right into a Valentin knee, and it could be all she wrote in a matter of 1 minute, in a matter of one round, in a matter of, in the second or third round. I mean, Finney's going to be shooting for your legs constantly. He'll throw big, heavy shots to make you respect it, crack you on the feet, hurt you on the feet, take you down, lay on top of you, land some hard ground and pound, advanced positions, look for a submission. He's just a suffocating grappler, and for Valentin to lose in his previous matchup against Ryan Loder on the Ultimate Fighter finale, it's interesting, right? Because Valentin's a very, very explosive guy. 6 submission wins, 3 knockouts. You kind of thought that Loder could have struggled a little bit more, but as soon as he took Valentin down, man, he put him in the crucifix, landed some unanswered shots, and it was all she wrote. But throughout that bout, Valentin's got some slippery, awkward grappling that he got to the back of Loder. So I think that Finney needs to be very wise of the submission attacks and just careful that he doesn't, expend too much energy in this matchup, because Valentin's absolutely live to knock him out on the feet and also to scramble to one position and land a ground and pound strike and the fight be over, or possibly get to the back and choke him out. But I think that physicality in this situation, and when they grapple, I think that the frames of the two, it's going to be, favored towards Finney in this matchup. As soon as he's on his back, I think that Valentin's going to struggle with getting up. I mean, if we're looking at the Contender Series matchups, Finney's takedowns attempted per 15 minutes sits at 14.5. That's ridiculous. That's second most on the entire slate. And that's crazy. I mean, he's going up against the guy who struggled to defend the takedown in his previous fight. And I think that if Finney gets on top of him, he could work towards a finish. He could also work towards a 30-27, maybe getting a 10-8 in one round. But yeah, I'm going to be picking Torres Finney here. I could see why people want to get to Valentin, but again, it's a tempting underdog, but not one I'm willing to pull the trigger on. So give me Torres Finney to pull off the victory here at a pretty damn good salary, and given his fighting style, one that's pretty favorable for DFS.
To kind of give the background story on Torres Finney, after he had won the first time on the Contender Series, doesn't get the contract. In the back, he's told, don't take a fight, we're going to put you on the Ultimate Fighter. Then if you recall, when he came back the second time, Dana White basically blasted him for not taking a fight. Dana White didn't know the matchmakers were trying to put him on Tough. And then basically they made an international season of Tough. So Torres Finney still on the sidelines for 1 year because he thought he was going to be on the Ultimate Fighter.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. That's some good insight right there. But yeah, left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, when you have 600 plus fighters on your roster, Dana White's not going to know exactly everything that's going on.
Correct. And, real quick on the strength of schedule, I mean, Torres Finney hasn't fought the greatest competition. Yeah. His strength of schedule sits at 50%, whereas Valentin sits at 62%. But within their wins, it's a closer number, 50% for Finney and 54% for Valentin. So basically the same. I have Finney winning a decision or just dominating and getting him out of there, but I could see why you'd be tempted to pull the trigger on Valentin.
Per Brendan Fitzgerald, due to medical issues, Daniel Santos is out. And so the fight has been canceled.
Sucks.
That's awful for Davey Grant. You weigh in, and your opponent never makes it to the scales. And hopefully the UFC takes care of him or at least gets him booked here in the near future.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, look, we saw it happen with John Castaneda. He loses the final weigh-in day, then it's him the next week. Man, it's the unfortunate part of this business here. Let's move over to our next matchup. We got our biggest betting favorite on this card as Barbosa. She is a 13-1 betting favorite here. Wow. $9,400 on DK, $22 on FanDuel. 𝐉𝐵𝐸 is $6,800 on DraftKings, $9 on FanDuel, a plus 700 betting underdog here. 𝐉𝐵𝐸 2-5 in the UFC. She's lost back-to-back fights. And then, of course, on the other side, Barbosa, her last fight was a loss against Miranda Maverick.
Yeah, holy moly, huh? It's kind of crazy to see the money that's come in on Barbosa, but I totally understand it, and I agree with it. I mean, Deonna Barbosa, she looks the part. She looks to be like a fighter. She looks like a fighter. She looks in incredible shape all the time. Very good judoka, very solid striking, I'll say, but her judo skills and her grappling is much better than her opponent in this matchup, in Deonna 𝐉𝐵𝐸. I think that this is a very easy matchup for Deonna Barbosa, and I think that Deonna 𝐉𝐵𝐸 is a fighter that has never really put it together. She has a 15-minute decision over Oliveira where she scored 90. She beat Hannah Goldie where she scored 88. But outside of that, she's 2-5 in the UFC. So 7 fights in the UFC, 15-9 overall. And then when you go and you look at Deonna Barbosa, she's fought a significantly tougher level of competition. I mean, her win rate of her strength of schedule is at 67%, whereas Deonna 𝐉𝐵𝐸 is at 52%. But the massive difference here, Jason, is that the win rate of the people Deonna Barbosa has beaten sits at 63%, whereas the people that 𝐉𝐵𝐸 has beaten sits at 43%. So 𝐉𝐵𝐸, she'll beat some extremely low-level competition, but struggle everywhere else. Deonna Barbosa, very, very talented fighter, very physical, and this is a much easier matchup than everything she's had so far in the UFC. So, 𝐾𝐤𝐬𝐳 in her debut, tougher matchup than 𝐉𝐵𝐸, and definitely Miranda Maverick, tougher matchup than 𝐉𝐵𝐸. So this is a softball matchup for Deonna Barbosa, and one where I think that she takes down 𝐉𝐵𝐸 and she either ground and pounds her or she submits her. I think likely she submits her because 𝐉𝐵𝐸 has a knack for giving up the armbar. Getting submitted by Molly McCann is not the greatest look in hindsight, right? I mean, we've seen Molly McCann's grappling, and in 2025, you have Molly McCann retiring from struggling to compete with some grapplers in the UFC. But I think that Deonna 𝐉𝐵𝐸 will get submitted one way or another. May not be an armbar specifically, but I think that, Deonna Barbosa is going to take her down, do whatever the hell she wants with her. And if this goes longer, then it's just going to be, I think it's going to be one-way traffic. And we've already heard 𝐉𝐵𝐸, in the media talk about how this could be her last fight, and she's not really focused on the result, all this and that, all stuff that I don't really love hearing. So I think that Barbosa is a smash spot. And as soon as that media came out, that's why heavy money came on Barbosa. So give me Barbosa, and she's at a discount from Loma Lookboonmee I don't even think it's close. I'd rather play Barboza than Luke Boomy. So give me Barboza as my favorite play in the 9,000 range.
I feel like Mel Beats has been talking about retirement for a while.
Yeah.
I want to say I heard something along the lines of she wants to open up a gym in the United States.
Yeah.
Was something that I heard there. But yeah, it's definitely, to me, it's take the favorite or pass in that situation. Then we got another matchup where we got a fighter who's 0-4 in the UFC taking on a UFC debuter. Of course, Daniel making his UFC debut here, a -150 betting favorite, 𝐒600 $16 on FanDuel. He's, of course, came off Dana White's Contender Series. Prior to that, had competed in LFA. Of course, McKee, we have seen him. This is now his second stint in the UFC. Went 0-2 his first time, 0-2 in this stint. 3 of those 4 UFC fights have gone to the distance. He is $7,600 on DK and $14 on FanDuel, Pete.
Yeah, I'm expecting McKee to be one of the most popular plays on the slate. You have a Dana White's Contender Series fighter in Daniel Frunza going up against Rhys McKee, who's fought a ton of tough guys, hasn't had any success in the UFC, has had competitive moments, of course, but he's a guy that's, again, never really put it together. 0-4 in the UFC, lost 3 decisions to 𝐃𝐤𝐬𝐳, Ange Loosa, Alex Morono, and obviously got stopped and finished pretty brutally against 𝐉𝐨 HaShimaev. Didn't even score a point. Not even a tenth of a point, nothing against 𝐉𝐨 HaShimaev. Didn't even do nothing. And I think that's when, he didn't even land anything on him. He just got his ass kicked. Yeah, I mean, that's 𝐉𝐨 HaShimaev. I can't hold that against him. In this matchup, though, you have Frunza coming off the Contender Series where he did show some vulnerabilities. Wasn't the cleanest performance, but one thing that you can take from that performance is that the guy's tough and that he will continue to fight and he will deal with adversity pretty well. If he's conscious, he's going to go out there and he's going to try his best to fight and try to win. He was submitted back in 2021 from Gary Boletto. That's interesting. And he was also submitted in 2016 against Simone Tessari. Typically a striker. He likes to go out there, throw heavy punches, throw a heavy kick. And I just think the defense of Rhys McKee is pretty shitty, to be honest. For him not to get finished against 𝐃𝐤𝐬𝐳 when 𝐃𝐤𝐬𝐳 went on and did that to Zaleski dos Santos, as we predicted and as I predicted, it's a testament to McKee's toughness and one that's going to make McKee a very popular underdog. I just always hesitate because I feel like there's a ton of these fighters that just where, they fought good, tough competition and we're waiting for them to get their first win and it just never materializes. This could be the one, though, where Frunza is very talented, has shown to get hurt, but McKee's striking defense sits at 42%. His takedown defense sits at 41%. I mean, that's a combined 83% defensive rating. So honestly, if Frunza puts together a complete mixed martial arts fight, he should go out there and have pretty good success. From the one fight on Contender Series to McKee's entire fights in the UFC, 11.22 strikes attempted for Frunza, 10.6 for McKee. And it comes down to the strength of schedule where Frunza, even though he hasn't been in the UFC, his total combined opponents record sits at 78-39, which is at 66%, whereas McKee's sits at 63%. So slight advantage for Frunza. Clearly hasn't fought 𝐉𝐨 HaShimaev or anybody in the UFC. But of the people they've beaten, you have a 10-point swing for Frunza at 67% and McKee at 57%. So really not a confident call here. I think that Frunza's right hand and his right leg are kind of the difference makers here. Even in the matchup where people think that Rhys McKee did enough to possibly steal the victory over 𝐃𝐤𝐬𝐳, he scored 26 fantasy points. So it's not, he didn't land a takedown. He had 6 minutes of control time, a lot of cage pressing, and 30 significant strikes were landed. So I think that he could look to go to the grappling well here against Frunza. And clearly there's a ton of, question marks surrounding Frunza. So I wouldn't really have this as part of my trustworthy candidates, but I'm still going to pick Frunza because I'm just not a Rhys McKee believer. I know that in Cage Warriors, McKee's had a ton of success finishing people, coming on as the fight gets extended. But I'm still going to pick Frunza to walk away with the victory here, and I'll probably try to avoid this fight because it seems like it's a complete headache.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not a McKee guy. I never really have been a McKee guy, and I would, if I'm going one way, I'm going with the favorite in that matchup. Next up, we got 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵 taking on Nunes. 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵 is a minus 850 betting favorite, plus 500 for 𝐒stela Nunes, who's 6,700 DK, $8 on FanDuel. 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵 9,500 DK, $23 on FanDuel. She was initially supposed to take on 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐳 in this spot. Nunes, this is probably one of those situations, Pete, where the UFC came to 𝐒stela Nunes and said, we got to fight for you. Take this fight or you're released.
Yeah, I also think it could be because she just came off that devastating arm injury too. I mean, a fluke situation. The fight was over before it started. She goes to plant her hand off a takedown, getting taken down, and her elbow just completely gets dislocated. So, I feel for 𝐒stela Nunes. I've had issues with my elbow in the past, a training accident, and I've had surgery on my elbow, and that was before my career really even started. And luckily, I had a very good surgeon and was able to get back and to actually get a professional win and start my career. But it's a very, very tough situation dealing with all that adversity from the injury standpoint, being on the sidelines, especially it's your arm. You know what I mean? You can't really do a lot. You can't do nothing. You can obviously, I remember I was immobilized for probably about 9 months. I worked on my left hand like crazy. So my lead hand developed. I worked on my kicks as best as I could without screwing up my arm. No grappling, no wrestling. But you got 𝐒stela Nunes here, who is a pretty damn good boxer. I have to give her credit, and I think that nobody gives her credit because she's winless in the UFC. I can agree with you and say that the UFC probably was like, listen, we feel bad for you. This is the one matchup we got for you, though. She's 0-4 in the UFC. One competitive fight was against Sam Hughes, where she scored 35.8. She was subbed in the third round against Ariana Carnelossi. She was knocked out in the second round against Yasmin Jauregui. And then obviously the injury against 𝗵𝗵𝐷𝐿𝐵𝐵. She had a moment against Jauregui where she knocked her down. And I think people sleep on the hands of 𝐒stela Nunes. The cardio is shit. She does not have good cardio. But she's pretty long and tall for the division. You'll have Loma 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵 with 3 years younger than 𝐒stela Nunes, but 𝐒stela Nunes will have 7.5 inches in the height plus reach department. So that's pretty significant in women's MMA. And I also think Nunes will have the better hands in this matchup. And I actually think that she could light up Loma in periods of the fight. Mm-hmm. It's if Loma initiates any grappling and stays on top, I think she's clearly the better grappler of the two. 𝐒stela Nunes has been on the shelf for a little bit, but that she has, been training with some of the best competition in the world on American Top Team since she's been healthy. So I do like that. I do love the grappling skill set of everybody at a part of the Coconut Creek American Top Team. And this is a situation where 𝐒stela Nunes comes from a Muay Thai background as well. So I almost think this is in a way, a tailor-made matchup for 𝐒stela Nunes' style. It's not an easy fight by any means, but she is a 2-time world champion, WMF and WMO. She's had 54 Muay Thai fights where she went 50-4. And a lot of people just sleep on 𝐒stela Nunes' striking because of her lack of success in the UFC. I think Loma's clearly the better fighter here. I think the wide significantly wide, and one where Loma's not the greatest finisher. I think people will be foolishly betting her to win via submission. And I shouldn't say foolishly. I can see why they would want to do that. But I'm not convinced that Loma's IQ in the grappling department is so much better than 𝐒stela Nunes. The cardio is definitely better for Loma. The overall MMA skill set's definitely better than Loma. Loma's decision in getting behind Syndicate MMA is definitely not a good decision. Going from my,
your favorite,
the team I love in Bang Tao to now seeing her at Syndicate. It's a head scratcher. And I think this could be one where screw it, a quarter unit, I'll throw it on 𝐒stela Nunes plus 3.5. Just because I think that there's a world where she could even win the fight if it goes 15 minutes and this is a tie fight. I don't know, man. I just would much rather prefer Diana Barbosa than Loma 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵. My model hasn't let me down yet. It went 11-1 last week in combination with me. Hubbard was the lone loss. My model likes 𝐒stela Nunes to beat Loma 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵, and honestly, the difference maker is the 7.5 reach advantage, the height plus reach advantage for 𝐒stela Nunes. I'm gonna pick Loma 𝐿𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵, but I don't think at this number I could recommend her. Right? I think a lot of parlays can be broken if she loses this fight, obviously. But maybe the -3.5 isn't a great call for Loma, especially if it goes 15 minutes. So I'll dabble on the underdog a little bit, and I'll dabble on the +3.5 for Stella Nunes. I think the whole world and market's going to be off of her, and that's kind of why I want to get behind her even slightly. If the ownership's at 5%, maybe I would double it, get to 10%. So what? I mean, who cares? I'd rather do that than roster some other fighters, right? Like, I don't know, man. There's just some fighters that I don't really want to get behind all that much. And in women's MMA, we know it's volatile and close at times. So here we go. American Top Team's better than Syndicate MMA, that's for sure. But, I mean, we'll have to see who's better in this matchup, Loma versus Stella. Give me Loma, but I would just dabble a few lineups with Stella Nunes just in case.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I would wonder with Luke Pumi, how much maybe the move to the Syndicate in Vegas is financially driven, just because of the PI and everything that goes on there. I mean, look, we're seeing a story where Jack Della Maddalena is doing a fundraiser to raise money to be able to pay his coaches to Montreal in May for his title
I saw
fight.
that, and then I saw that, and then I saw something come out where he denied it or something. I don't know, but basically, it's really hard. Because,
well, I mean, you're talking about you're flying from Australia to Canada. Like, that's not an expensive flight.
I know, but it's just it's crazy though, because like you spend so much money throughout camp to make it to the fight. You know what I mean? And so much of it's gone once you win the fight, and then like, you know what I mean? Like it all sounds good until you're at the top, then it's good. But it's a struggle on the way up, and even the guys in the UFC, like I'm pretty sure Jason Jackson, right, in the PFL, had a spectacular performance yesterday on the PFL. I fell asleep mid fight. I was tired, but pre-fight he was talking about. I think he was saying he was still landscaping, Jason. Like he goes, I train all day, and these guys don't push the way I push, because after I fight and train, I go out and I landscape and I do this and that, and then I come back and I train again. Jason Jackson's been a staple in MMA.
That's crazy.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I think it just tells you what the reality of prize fighting is in 2025.
It's hard, dude. It's UFC
especially if you're not getting fights.
Right.
I mean, let's look at Corey Anderson. Perfect example. Guy hasn't fought in a year. Now, Corey Anderson's made a ton of money over the past couple of years, but still, expenses don't end.
You better figure it out. And a lot of these guys, just because they're great fighters doesn't mean they can be good coaches or can teach their skills. I mean, sometimes the best athletes in the world cannot translate their skills or explain how they do things. They just do it. So it takes a special type of athlete to be able to level with a beginner and work with them and teach them. So that's why a lot of fighters don't become coaches, because it's really hard and they can't do it. They don't have the patience, or they can't explain it. They just do it. They're athletically gifted.
Warner Sapp was talking about that like 2 weeks ago. And he was just basically talking about, like, paraphrasing what he said. He's like, hey, I'm a Hall of Fame player. Like, my knowledge is, he goes, but what I've learned as a coach is every athlete's different. And he goes, I have to attack every athlete different of how I get the best out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to scream at some of my guys, and I got to like really be careful with some of my guys, because, me screaming at Jason Floyd, he may be able to take this constructive criticism, and that's the way I can get through to him. Me screaming at Samuel Campana, he may cry. You know what I mean? And he may break down and not, he may not have a good response to me, even though I'm trying to get the best out of him. That's the level of coaching where it's like, changing it from player to player or from fighter to fighter, which is, some of the best fighters in the world. Greg Jackson probably had to be certain ways for different people. Faraz Zahabi. I mean, the list goes on, but you guys understand what I'm saying.
That's what makes a coach great is understanding that, hey, let's just say things are going bad in a 3-round fight. We're through 10 minutes of fighting. Sometimes, that 50 seconds of corner work, 3/4 of it's motivational. Yeah. As opposed to or sometimes just say, you got to knock this motherfucker out.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, right, you got to get your message across. I mean, you can't really dance around stuff in certain spots. And every coach is different. Like, I know fighters and coaches that will tell their guys like, oh, that's our round. We won that round. We won that round.
Oof.
I have a completely different mentality, and I've always had this mentality with our guys is that it's not a dominant round. So we're going to chalk it up that we could have lost it. So now we're down one. And I
Yeah.
want you to go out there and make some adjustments. I'd rather be safe until you lost the round, than kind of tell Jason, I think, we should have won that round. And then the decision comes out and they look at me like, why didn't you tell me to push more? You know what I mean? So I'd rather be that type of coach than at the end be regretting my information, relaying to you.
Well, it seems like every week there's a coach that tells their fighter they won the round, and we're kind of like,
I don't get that. I just don't get it.
Like, what fight were you watching?
I don't get it. I really don't understand it. Maybe it's to not screw up the opponent's, not screw up their fighter's confidence.
Yeah.
And they know that their fighters have a fragile ego. But for me, I kind of always said, close round. Let's act like we lost that, okay? We got two more. I just would rather do that.
Next up, we got Victor Henry taking on Pedro Falco, who has his first fight first time in a year. It was April 6th of last year, so nearly 1 year exactly to the date. He's a plus 185 betting underdog, minus 225 for Henry, who's 8,800 on DK, $17 on FanDuel. Pedro, 7,400 on DK, and $13 on FanDuel. As I was putting my sheet together here earlier today, Pete, I was like, I'm looking at Victor Henry, and I'm like, God, I remember I was so high on him in his last matchup, and he goes out there and gets submitted by Charles Jourdain.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, he's another guy that I've really kind of labeled as untrustworthy, right? And one where we may have overvalued him because of his debut over 𝐼𝐠 Barcelos. I mean, you have a guy in Victor Henry who's fought some tough level competition. We know his background, very, very good catch wrestler, solid striker. And one where like, all right, over 𝐼𝐠 Barcelos, he pops off with 113.5. But how many times in people's debuts do they kind of, almost like they overperform, and then in their second fights, they kind of level out a little bit, and then after that, it's like, man, I remember the guy that broke onto the scene with the win over 𝐼𝐠 Barcelos when he was priced at 6,900, and then he lost to Rafael Assunção, and then he picked up a win over Tony Gravely, and then that could not continue against Basharat, and then knocked out, Hani Yahya, and then going up against a striker and Charles Jourdain, and lands 4 takedowns but gets submitted. It's like, you got submitted against Charles Jourdain, something that's just a very, very head-scratching type of performance. I think that Pedro Falcao is interesting. 16-4 overall. Victor Henry will have 3 inches in the height plus reach department. Falcao has 5 years on Victor Henry. The strength of schedule definitely resides with Victor Henry, where his win rate sits at 64% and Falcao sits at 58%. Within the wins, 61% for Henry and 54% for Falcao. So definitely Henry's fought and beaten the better level of competition. And typically Henry has a pretty good anti-wrestling, anti-grappling type of style. Just got submitted against Charles Jourdain and now paired up against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and Falcao, who's very, very good at getting the backpacking his opponent and riding them and looking for a submission win. So it's interesting, right? Like, have you patched your hole? I don't even consider it a hole. Have you worked on, your vulnerabilities in the grappling department? And are you wise enough to not get put in that position, get out of it, not get submitted, and win back rounds? Because a lot of times it can be lost getting your back controlled. And next thing you know, 15 minutes expires and you lost the decision. So the striking output, clearly favors Victor Henry here. Obviously a small sample size for Pedro Falcao, just going off his Contender Series fight and his debut against Hugo. But yeah, 14.4 for Victor Henry, whereas 6 attempted for Falcao. And I expect Falcao to be attempting 9 takedowns in this fight as long as it goes 15 minutes. And I do think that he'll end up probably getting about 1 to 2 of them. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be siding with Victor Henry. I think that he's going to keep it on the feet or reverse some positions, sprawl and brawl his way to a 15-minute decision. Something I wouldn't really want to get behind for DFS. I understand the high volume in a lot of his wins, but I think a lot of that volume can be kind of capped because of the defensive skills. But because of him defending everything. or possibly being put in a compromising situation. So give me Victor Henry to win a decision. I'm not really interested in DFS. If I were to play a side for DFS, it would probably be Falcao as an underdog to possibly get the back and work towards a submission or win a decision. But it's something I'll pass on. But give me Henry to win the fight.
Next up, we got a female matchup, which is our 8,000 A200 fight. That's 𝗲𝐷 and Alencar. Alencar, a minus 115 betting favorite, minus 105 for 𝗲𝐷, who's 8,000 on DK, 14 on FanDuel. Alencar, A200 on DK, and $15 on FanDuel. She lost her debut. Alencar lost her UFC debut back in August of last year. And for Vanessa 𝗲𝐷, 6 of her 8 UFC fights have gone the distance.
Yeah, I mean, listen, 𝗲𝐷. Let's pull this up. I mean, 𝗲𝐷, I don't know what the hell she does, but if it's a close fight, the judges tend to favor her. I mean, there are plenty of fights within within her resume that, are very, very close. Kanaka Murata, the Ducote fight, Oliveira, Frey. I mean, like, you could go on and on. Obviously, the one submission win against Savannah Gomez Juarez was nice, but she got knocked down pre-armbar. She's just a fighter that I've never been high on. And I don't want to sound like a hater, but I just don't think she's good. But the problem is I don't know if Talita Alencar is all that good in MMA. I mean, Alencar is a jiu-jitsu specialist. If these ladies just had a jiu-jitsu match, I would be favoring Talita Alencar heavily. But, when strikes are involved, I think that 𝗲𝐷, she emphasizes every strike that she throws. She kias every time she throws something. So it kind of reminds the judges that she's throwing hard shots. She advances. I don't know if she's going to be able to defend all the takedowns that Talita Alencar is going to be attempting here, truthfully. I have Talita Alencar attempting 15 takedowns per 15 minutes, which is absolutely ridiculous, given that 𝗲𝐷's takedown defense sits at 27%. So, I mean, usually 𝗲𝐷 is the better jiu-jitsu fighter, but she's definitely not in this matchup against Talita Alencar. I mean, Alencar has some very high-level, notable wins in in her jiu-jitsu career. It's just she has to get the fight to that point. I think that she will struggle in moments in this fight, but like Vanessa 𝗲𝐷, 27% takedown defense sticks out like a sore thumb. And I understand that people are like, well, UFC experience for 𝗲𝐷. She's beating this one and that one. I mean, she could be on like a 4-fight losing streak right now, if you really want to call it what it is. I'm just not too sold on her. I think that as long as this fight stays standing, obviously she's going to win the fight. But I don't think that Alencar is going to fight that type of fight. I mean, like, she landed 109 significant strikes over Ducote. Ducote didn't attempt as many takedowns as Alencar is going to. And if Alencar doesn't attempt takedowns, then she's foolish. But I expect Alencar to be shooting from the get-go. And I think that even if Alencar, gets on bottom, she's savvy and skilled enough to work towards submission skills, to work towards sweeps and advances and everything. And I think that, she just needs to win 2 rounds. And I really think because of the gap in the skill set, like, everybody thinks 𝗲𝐷's grappling is that good. I truthfully don't think it's even close to Alencar's on the mat. And I would love for them to grapple or get into a grappling situation to see if I'm right or see if I'm wrong. But whereas everybody's going to be playing Vanessa 𝗲𝐷, I'd much rather probably play Alencar in hopes of her getting tons of takedowns and control time or working towards a submission finish because, I really think that she could submit Vanessa 𝗲𝐷 very similar to how Jacqueline Emerim did. Emerim's got way better striking, and she's definitely a very talented overall MMA fighter. She grabbed the inside of Vanessa 𝗲𝐷's glove in their previous fight together, but I think that Talita Alencar is very good and wise and experienced in the grappling department. And her fighting her fighting Stephanie Luciano on the Contender Series and then in the UFC, I think it's a hard, tough task, but it is women's MMA. If it's a close fight, you can already expect that the judges, for whatever reason, are going to be picking Vanessa 𝗲𝐷 to win the bout, which I don't really understand. So I'll probably pass on it, but my pick will be Talita Alencar to beat Vanessa 𝗲𝐷.
And then our opening fight of the night is a fight that came together over the last 24 hours. Of course, Martin Buday was supposed to take on 𝐾𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐜𝐻. Of course, 𝐒𝐬𝐬𝐜𝐻 out now. Euron, the LFA light heavyweight champion, stepping up here. He weighed in at 222.5 pounds earlier today. Martin Buday weighing in at 266 pounds. So huge difference there in terms of those guys.
Huge.
Buday, a minus 155 betting favorite, plus 130 for Euron, who, by the way, is 7,900 on DraftKings. Haven't seen the price tag on FanDuel yet. Buday, 7,000 on DraftKings, $10 on FanDuel. Martin Buday, 5-1 in the UFC. 4 of those fights have gone the distance here. And me and Pete were talking about this fight a little bit before the show, and I think the one question is ultimately is, if Buday cannot maybe, if this is a fight at distance, does maybe the speed and athleticism of Euron play a factor in him getting the win?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. Light heavyweights are better than heavyweights. I mean, they're more athletic. They're better. And, they tend to have a higher skill level within the division, better cardio. And, that's why we see 𝐾𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐽 popping up, to the heavyweight division. I mean, honestly, I don't like the massive gap in weight, though. Like 222 to 266, that's significant. And my worry here is for every opponent facing Martin Buday is that they just get pressed up against the cage for 15 minutes. Buday is such a big guy that he's not in great shape. He will just press you against the cage and kind of dirty box you. But I don't think that he's good. And that's the problem. And I'm having a really hard time with this fight. And I don't have data on the fight to really help my case. So when I see, 𝐷𝗵𝐵 coming in here as a slight favorite over a guy who had a full camp in Martin Buday, it's interesting to me because, you would think that the guy that had the full camp that was fighting a guy in 𝐾𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐽 who's climbing the rankings and honestly could be fighting for a title, in a couple years from now, given his success in the heavyweight division. It's just interesting because you would think that Martin Buday would get a more respect on his line, So I expected Buday to flip to a favorite, even if it was a slight favorite. But 𝐷𝗵𝐵 is an undefeated guy, and I dove into his record a little bit. His opponent's win rate, his opponent's record sits at 55 wins and 33 defeats. So his strength of schedule win rate sits at 62.5. Martin Buday's opponents sit at 184 and 123, which is 59%. And obviously 𝐷𝗵𝐵 is undefeated, so his win strength is 62.5, and Buday's is at 57%. So, I mean, going off of that, it's not that 𝐷𝗵𝐵 has fought poor competition, because he hasn't. He also has 3 inches in the height plus reach department. I don't know, man. I really don't know, because I've seen 𝐷𝗵𝐵 look pretty vulnerable in multiple fights. But he's a guy that does not quit. I mean, this guy was putting in I don't know how many triangle chokes in his second to last fight. And I said, every time I watch the fight, I go, oh my God, this guy's going to get finished again. But he didn't get finished. And he fought through it. And he made his opponent work. And I actually think that him fighting in March is a good thing. It's not like he's completely off the couch. He could have been staying active. I wish that he had a full camp, obviously. He's 9-0. Pretty long fighter, pretty explosive hands. Will grapple as well. He's fighting out of Osh City in Kyrgyzstan. They don't even know his age on Tapology, which is a red flag. Like, there's so many red flags, right? Like, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They don't even know how old this guy is. I mean, it reminds me of the adult that was playing in the Little League World Series, throwing 95 miles an hour. So I'm just very interested. It was the Bruno Assis fight in LFA where he faced a ton of adversity, showed that he had better cardio than Bruno Assis. That was in round 4 when he was able to sprawl, hit him with some ground and pound, put him in some bad spots, take the back. And against Leon Soares, he won via Kimura. I think this is going to be a scrappy fight, and one where, like, I could see it being pretty even. I don't have Martin Buday attempting a ton of takedowns in this fight at all. 0.84 for 15 minutes is nothing. I have Buday's strikes per minute sitting at 9. after watching several fights of 𝗵𝗵, I would kind of think that he's around the same, if not a little bit more. Light heavyweights tend to have a little bit more activity than heavyweights. Again, my worry is him just getting pressed up against the cage. What do I do here, Jason? I think that Buday is going to be very, very popular, truthfully. But they're both underdogs, so I don't like the no camp. I don't like... I'm going to go with 𝗵𝗵. I just think that anybody that went to a 15-minute decision with Łukasz Brzeski and lost, in my opinion, lost that fight, you're going to lose to 𝗵𝗵 as long as he doesn't gas out. But there's worry that 𝗵𝗵 is not in shape to handle 15 minutes and that he could get finished. You know, there's a ton of worries in this fight, but I think 𝗵𝗵 with a full camp would beat the hell out of Łukasz Brzeski. So... yeah. Martin Buday, that's an ugly, ugly fight, man. He knew he lost that fight, and he was awarded the win. So give me 𝗵𝗵 here at 7,900. Obviously, they're both going to be pretty damn popular on the slate.
Yeah, I would expect that Buday is going to be very popular on DraftKings at a $7,000 price tag and FanDuel at $10. Let's get into our straight-up fight picks. Main event, I'm going to go Lerone Murphy.
I'm going Josh Emmett, buddy.
I'll go Brito and the Co.
Yes. Yeah. Give me... the hell's his name? Brito,
yeah. I'll go Lee over 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝐕HS.
Yeah, 𝐃𝐤𝐬𝐜 Lee.
Man. I'll take Brad because I think he keeps on the feet. But like GM3 as a pump play.
Totally agree.
I'll go with Luis.
Yeah, give me Gurule.
Finney. Barbosa.
Barboza, big time.
Daniel
Franza.
Luma.
Yeah, I'll go Loma Lookboonmee.
Give me Henry.
Victor Henry.
I'm gonna say Alan Carr gets the job done.
Alan Carr for me as well.
I'm gonna pick Buday because of the weight.
Okay. Yeah, and to kind of, piggyback off of what we were talking about earlier. So the lines, Buday he's a -150 favorite. Uran 𝗵𝗵 is a +126 favorite. So you got a +126 underdog. So you got a +126 underdog sitting at 7,900, and then you have Martin Buday as a favorite -154 at 7,000. I'm gonna go with 𝗵𝗵, but I totally understand.
Let's see here. Let's get questions from Sam over in Discord, and we'll get out here on this episode of the podcast. Best top plays. I will say
Barboza.
Okay. I like Emmett as a cash play.
I love Josh Emmett as a cash. I don't think that he gets finished. So
I would probably say Barbosa would be top one for me.
I mean, I like Torres Finney as well.
Yeah. Live dogs. I would say GM3, and you gotta say Emmett.
Yeah, I say Emmett's live. I think 𝗵𝗵 is live. I think Valentine's live, but I don't like him in the fight.
Best inside the distance fights, man. I'd look up and down this card. Why do I see a lot of decisions?
I think the same thing, and a lot of favorites too.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Barbosa would be one that would stick out to me as someone to get the job done. But man, I just see a lot of these fights going the distance. Favorite parlays. I would be trying to look at like an over 3.5, over 4.5 prop on the main event. Just because I think it does go 15 minutes or 25 minutes, excuse me. I mean, but if to me, like the ones I feel most comfortable with are 3-1 favorites and up. That's what's an issue for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like Deonna Barboza. I think the submission line makes a ton of sense. I also think that her just inside the distance to be safe. I mean, let me pull up this stuff right here. Deonna Barboza to win via submission, -125. I think that's her most likely path to victory. She could pound out Deonna Belbita. I'm not going to play that over 4.5 in the main event. The only reason, Jason, is because Josh Emmett's power. Right? Like, I would be sitting there kicking myself like, oh, my God. I expect it to go 25 minutes, but I think there's some other spots. Like, I think the Sabatini and Brito under is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Under 1.5 sits at plus 120. That's kind of damn interesting. Maybe they don't think that Sabatini gets KO'd that early. I mean, Joe Anderson Brito KO is plus 110. He has his decision plus 390. If it goes 15 minutes, I don't expect Brito to be the guy that wins.
Yeah.
Truthfully. I just don't. I think that he lands a shot. I can't see him winning a 15-minute decision and not winning. I mean, not KOing him. I just can't.
Top pump plays for me, it is Emmett and GM3.
Yeah, I'm going to go Emmett. We got no Davy Grant now. I mean, I guess you could be, it's a cop-out and say Boudet, 7,000. I mean, that's, technically it's a punt, but for betting it's not. So
yeah. Road to Mansion Series, over under 7.5. Give me the under.
Under, buddy.
Top captains and MVP. Maybe Torres Finney, if he can get these takedowns.
Yeah, I have takedowns attempted per 15 minutes. Alan Carr at 15.38 and Finney at 14.55. So, I mean, crazy amounts of takedowns in both of those fights will be attempted.
Yeah. Of course, if you do have any questions, you can line those questions up in the YouTube chat or in Discord. We can get to you. Of course, Discord, totally free to join. Also, don't forget we got that offer from 𝐶𝐭. Get 15% off any MMA subscription that you do have. All you have to do is use the promo code FightHQ. So that's going to do it for this episode of Fight HQ. We'll talk to you next week as we'll be getting you ready for UFC 314.